Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Nick Bearman and welcome to this short video going through Practical 3. So this is for my Introduction to QGIS, Spatial Data and Spatial Analysis course. So I'm going to show you how to go through the various steps for Practical 3. So I will just share my screen. This is the workbook I'll be going through, so please do check out the links below this video for all the details of how to get that. So I'm just going to move that over onto my other screen, and we've got our empty QGIS project here. So we're going to start with a completely blank project. So Practical 3A was a recap, QGIS and choropleth maps. So just to kind of remind us what we're doing about adding data, joining data, and creating a choropleth map. So this is, I've just opened QGIS here. If you've got something open already, you can always click Project New, and that will give you a blank screen. So we're going to use the Open Data Source Manager tool, this one here, and we're going to add our local authority districts boundaries layer. This was from Practical 2 that we've done previously, and it's a geo package. So we can go into the geo package option in here. You may have it listed already if you've already got it in here, but if you haven't, you can always click New and then browse to wherever practical2.data is, and we can tell this is a geo package because it's .gpkg. If we hit open, and it's listed here, but we haven't actually connected to it yet, so we have to tell QGIS, okay, we actually want to use this, so click Connect, and QGIS will go off and see what layers we have in the geo package. So we've got a few here. We want the local authorities districts April 19. So select that and choose Add. So it's added our data. We can see it's listed in the layers window there. So we can then close this. And here we go. So as and we've also just done a transformation from 4326 to 27700. So this is just reprojecting the data so we can show it. But we can ignore that. We don't need to worry about that. So we're also going to get some IMD data. So we've got our URL to go to, which looks like this, English Indices of Deprivation. And we've got various bits of information if we want to. If you're interested in finding out more, the infographic is quite good. That's what I used in my lecture slides. But we want them by local authority district because that's the geography that we're using. And we have an Excel spreadsheet, and we'll save this. You notice I'm in Documents, GIS, Practical 3. So it's always good to have your files nice and organized so you know where everything is. And so I'm using Practical 3 for this. So this is an Excel spreadsheet. So let's have a look at that. And here it is in Excel. So the first page is the kind of, information, what is it, blah, blah, blah. We want the IMD tab. So this one on the bottom left. And here we have our local authority district code in column A, which is what we'll be using later, the name in district B, and various different measures of the IMD. So they've taken the IMD for each LSI and aggregated it to the local authority. And there's various different ways of doing this. And which one's best depends exactly on what you're interested in. We're mostly going to be using IMD average score because that's an easy score to work out and to work with. So that looks good. Okay, so let's go back to QGIS and go into Data Source Manager. Now, there's a couple of ways we can do this. Probably the easiest is to use the browser option here. And then we can go into Home, which will be our user home directory, and then into Documents, and then into GIS, and then into Practical 3. That's our Excel spreadsheet. And we see all the options here, and we want the IMD spreadsheet. If you're working on a computer that's been set up by an organization, so it might be your university or your employer, and if you're storing stuff either on OneDrive or on a shared network drive, this interface may not show exactly what you want or what you think. You know, sometimes you go into documents and it's not your documents folder, or you go into desktop and the stuff's not there where it is actually on your desktop. So you may need to have a poke around to find out exactly where you need to go. If you can't find it, we do have another option. So the other option is to go into Windows Explorer and then drag the Excel spreadsheet and drop it into QGIS. And this shows this window, and this is saying, this is a spreadsheet, which tab do you want to use? So we can always go for the IMD tab, that's what I want, and choose Add Layers. So whichever way you've got it in, you should now have the IMD data there. Notice that it's got a little, not the icon, but the kind of list, the attribute table icon there. That means it's not spatial data, so it's just a table. And we can look at it. So right click, open attribute table, and we have the same columns as we did in Excel. So code, name, average rank, rank average score, and so on. So we're now going to join these two together. So, and we're going to use the code. So on this one, it's called Local Authority District Code 2019. And on our local authority districts, on our spatial data, we look at the attribute table, we're going to use LAD 19CD. Okay, so let's tell QGIS we want to join these. Right click, properties, then click joins, add join. So we're saying, we've already said we're using the local authority district spatial data because that's what we right clicked on. So we say, what do we want to join it to? We've only actually got one option here. So file 10, our IMD data, which is what we want. And what field do we want to use? So it's automatically selected the first one from our IMD data, local authority district code, which is what we want. The target field is what we're using in our local authority district shapefile. And it is not selected that correctly. So it's just gone for the first in list. We actually need LAD 19CD. And if we click OK, we can see it's appeared in here. And if we click OK again, now it's done the join. We never trust QGIS to do what it's supposed to though, so it's always worth checking. So if you right click on there, choose Open Attribute Table, we can see if it has done the join. So we've got our existing data, LA code, LA name, and so on. And if we scroll across, we can see we have the IMD data. So this one is the local authority name from that data. And then these are the various measures. You see some of these titles are ridiculously long because it's appended the column name, which was fairly long, to the file name, which was ridiculously long. So it's sometimes a bit hard to see all these names. So this is the one we're mainly going to be using, and it's called this horrendous file name. File 10, IOD 2019, Local Authority District Summaries, lower tier, IMD average score. But we'll rename that in a little bit. But this is the column that we're going to be using. Cool. So we've done this join now, but it's not permanent. So we need to make sure we save it so that we don't lose the join. And we can do this by exporting the data. So right click on the layer, choose export, save features as. And we're going to create a new geopackage. So we can do this all within QGIS. So geopackage is the default format. That's what we're going to use. Now we need to choose where we're going to save it. So never just type a file name in here because you don't know where it's going to put it. Always click the browse button and then it will open your folder. See, we're in GIS Prac3 and we want to call it Prac3 data. You choose save and you can see it's actually put the full file path in. So the hard disk and all the folders that it's stored in. And then we also need to give it a sensible name. So this is our local authority district and our IMD. So let's call this LA IMD and choose OK. And it's actually added this as a new layer. If we want to be tidy, we could remove the other two layers because we don't need them now. So let's do that. Right click, choose remove, and right click on this one, choose remove as well. And so now we've just got the one layer with our IMD data in it. Here we go. Yeah, so that's the scores. And we can symbolize this as well. So we can right click on here, choose properties, symbology. At the moment, everything is symbolized using what it calls single symbol. So everything is the same color. We want to show our IMD score. So if we choose graduated, and then where it says value, if we go down here and choose IMD average score, QGIS hasn't actually looked at the data yet. So we have to say classify, and that says go away, look at the data, come back and split it into 5 classes, quantiles in this case. If we hit OK, we have our map. So we have lower levels of deprivation in some of these local authorities in the northern bit of this chunk, and then higher levels of deprivation in the southern ones. And it might be that this kind of classification isn't great, so we might want to go for natural breaks instead. And it's adjusted the classes slightly to give us a better map. And there's lots of things you can experiment with this. So feel free to have an experiment with this. So we're going to carry on with practical 3B now, joining population data. But first of all, we should save our project. So you can see at the top here, it says star untitled project, and that means we've not saved it. So click project and then save. And now let's give it a name. So we're going to call this practical 3. And I'm going to call this version 1 because it's the first one that I've saved. So that's all saved now. So the next stage is we're going to add some population data. So we go to the website in the workbook, and we've got some data to download. So this is the estimated population, and we're actually going to use the 2019 version of this data set. So this is both like the 2019 population data, so population for 2019, but also the April 2019 local authority district codes. So every so often the local authority districts change. We're using the April 2019 version, and that is the same version as what we used here. And if you remember in the file name, it did talk about April 2019. So again, this is another Excel spreadsheet. So let's download that and have a look at it as well. So again, we've got this kind of preamble sheet, but we've got a bunch of other sheets with some text on it, which we don't need to know. There's some explanations of the different geographies. The key bit we want is this mid-year estimates to persons. So this is the number of people in each geographic unit. And if you do note, the header row is row 5. So we've got rows 1 through 4, where we've got some kind of extra title and bits and bobs in it, which we don't need. And then we have the kind of country level total numbers of population, but also then we go down to unitary authority, which is a bit we're interested in. This, we started with the northeast, but we're obviously interested in the south, southeast, southwest, so that's further down the list. Cool, so we're good to use that. Let's go back to QGIS and add the data in using the data source manager. So this time I'm going to go through practical 3 like we did before. And it's not actually appeared here. So let's press the refresh button, which says to QGIS, go now and have a look, see if anything else has turned up. And it has. So here's our UK mid-year estimates. And then we want the mid-year estimates to persons. So we don't just want males or females, we want everybody. So we want mid-year to estimate persons. And if we double click on that, this will add it to QGIS. So here it is. Let's have a look in the attribute table. Here we go. And as you may see, we've got these 4 rows at the beginning, which don't have any useful information, so we can ignore those. our column headers have actually come up in row 5 rather than along the top. So we're going to need to rename some of these. So we want to rename field 1, which is the code we need to do the join with, and field 4, which is the population, which is the bit of information we're actually interested in. So to do this, we can right-click on here, choose Properties, and then go into Fields. So we want to edit this. This is our list of fields and the type, but we can't. And this is because it's stored as an Excel file, and QGIS can't edit these Excel files. So we need to export it into a form that we can work with. So we can save this into our GEO package. So right-click, export, save features as, and choose GEO package. We can choose package 3 data, and then we're going to give it a sensible name. So mid-year 2 estimate persons is fine, so we'll stick with that. It says CRS invalid projection, but that's not a problem. It's just not a projection because it's not a spatial data set. Cool. So we've now got 2 entries. You notice it's put the geo package name at the front of the entry here. So if we put the mouse over, you can see it says Prac3 data geo package, layer name, MYE2 persons. If we look at this one, this is the Excel one. So let's get rid of this, just so we don't get confused about what layers we're working with at what point. We go back into Properties, Fields. Now we can edit this. So we can actually change all of these fields. So we want to change field 1 to LA code and field 4 to POP 2019. We choose OK. If we then go back into the attribute table, we can see we've got LA code and POP 2019. Excellent. We're still in editing mode at the moment, but we want to save our edits, which is this save button here with a little pencil icon. So that says make these changes and then choose save. And we want to turn editing off as well. At the moment, if we go back in here, LA code is a string, which is fine. It's just the code number, but population 2019 is a string as well, which is not very helpful for us. We want it to be a number because otherwise we can't do calculations with it. So there's a few ways of doing this. The way I'm going to use is to use the refactor tool. So refactor fields is what we're looking for in the processing toolbox. And here it is. So it's selected our layer already, and we've got POP 2019, and we want to change that from text string, which is what it is at the moment, to decimal double. We don't need to do anything else, so we just hit run. And what QGIS do, we'll go through all of the rows in that column and change them from string to number. It's come up with this error here, and it's saying it couldn't convert everything to a number. And that's probably not an issue because it's probably those top 4 rows, but we should check. So let's close that. So we've got our refactored layer here. Note it has a little memory chip icon here. That means it's not saved anywhere. It's a temporary layer. So if we go, sorry, not into properties, let's go into the attribute table. And so we've got LA code, which is not changed, but we've got POP 2019. And these look like numbers. And it's also right aligned, which is how QGIS shows numbers. So this is a confirmation that it's actually a number. And if we hover over the field name, you say it says POP 2019 double, and that's the data type that we're working with. So if we do code, instead it says string. Cool. Okay. So one other thing we can do while we're here is get rid of all these extra fields, because we've got, you know, many of them, 256, which is just a bit bananas really, because we don't need them. So if we go back into editing and choose delete columns, delete field, QGIS should give us a list and we can choose which ones to delete. There we go. So we have to select first. So you can select them individually. You can hold down, select one, hold down Control on the keyboard and select individual ones like that. Be Command if you're on a Mac. Or if you select the first one and scroll down the list to the bottom, hold down Shift, the little arrow on the keyboard, that will select the whole range and we can then delete those columns. Now we'll think about it for a little bit, it's doing quite a bit of work, but those are the 3 that we need. So if we turn editing off, it will say, do you want to save? So we choose yes. And there we go. So if we go back into the attribute table, you can see we've just got these 3 columns, which is exactly what we want. So let's save this in our geo package as well, just so it's not a temporary file anymore. It's a formal layer. So we'll leave this as refactored, choose OK. Again, we've still got our temporary one and our new one, so let's get rid of the temporary one. Okay, so now we're going to join our population data onto the local authority IMD data. So we've got our spatial data, which is the local authority. We've got our IMD data, and we're adding the population data. So let's right-click, Properties, go into Joins, add a new join. We want the refactored layer, so that's the one we just saved. The join field is LA code, and our target field is LA19CD. Okay. Okay. So let's see if it's actually joined the data. So we've got our local authorities, our IMD stuff, and at the very end, we have refactored pop. I'm going to have to make the column a bit bigger so we can see it. Oops. Let's make that bigger. Scroll across, pop 2019. So this is the number of people in that local authority. So that's looking good. And again, we need to make sure we save it. So if we do export, save features as, geo package, Prac3 data, and let's call it this time LA IMD pop, because we have population. Cool. So we can, if we wanted to, we could symbolize some of this data on the map. We could also remove all of the other layers because we don't need any of these now. So let's get rid of those. And let's also save this. So we could just press save. That will update our existing file. But a different way is to save as and then call it version 2. So if we ever need to go back to version 1, we can. But for the moment, we've got version 2. Excellent. Okay, so now we're going to look at our Greenspace Access Points. So I've talked a bit about this in the slides, but the Greenspace Access Points are a point layer that we're going to use, and we're going to see how many green space there are in each local authority. So we can close that because we don't need that. So we're going to download some data from the OS Data Hub. So OS is Ordnance Survey, the Great Britain's National Mapping Agency, and we're going to find some green space data. And this data covers the whole of Great Britain and it's free for anyone to use for any purpose. So OS Open Green Space is what we want. We could download the whole country if we want, but that's a bit massive for what we want. So we're going to use Set a Custom Area. An Ordnance Survey have these tiles, and we're going to go for the SU tile. So that's this one here. Click Save Selection. And we can choose what format we want it in. We got the choice here, GML3 or shapefile. We're going to go for shapefile. And then it will just link us to the download. So click that, choose it in Prac3 again, and save. This is a zip file, so we need to make sure we extract it. So highlight the zip file, click extract, go through the wizard. So let's put it in a folder. Then we've got a folder for SU. Then we've got a folder for data. And then we've got two shapefile set. So SU access point and SU Greenspace site. So we're going to work with the access points data. This practical, we'll come to the Greenspace sites, which are polygons in practical 4. So for the moment, we're going to use the access points. So go back to QGIS. We can do layer, add vector layer. Make sure we got vector selected here. Choose browse. Navigate to the data file, SU access point. Here we go. Choose add and then close. And so you see we've got these series of points that covers this square, that covers most of the local authorities we're working with. So like this, they don't really look like a huge amount of useful information, but we can use the identify features tool, this one, to find out what's in the point. Make sure you have the layer you want to interrogate selected here. So we've got access points selected, so let's click on one of these points. And it's giving us a choice because we're a bit zoomed a bit far out. So we want SU access point. And as there's some ID numbers, some links. So I presume that's a reference to the Greenspace site and the access type pedestrian. But that's about it. It doesn't really help at all. Another thing we can do is if we add our OpenStreetMap base map, it's in the browser window here, go to XYZ tiles, OpenStreetMap, double click on that. This is transforming it, so we can just choose OK. So going from latitude, longitude to British National Grid. If we move this down beneath the access points layer, if we zoom in, so let's pick an urban area, here we go, it's Newbury. And we can see this is Victoria Park, obviously a bit of green space, and these are the entrances for it. So if we select one of those, and it will say, okay, it's access type pedestrian. And if we have a look, we can, here's another park, Stroud Green. Let's see what that one says. So another pedestrian access point. So this is a useful way of kind of seeing what data is there and what this data actually means. Cool. Okay. So we're going to use a tool called Point in Polygon to see how many points are in each of our local authority polygons. So we go under processing at the top toolbox, and then if we do search for count point, and we want under vector analysis count points in polygon. And this kind of does what it sounds like. So it'll tell us how many points are in each polygon. So, okay, we've got to choose our polygons. So LA IMD pop, which is the data we prepared. Now points layer, SU access points. We hit run and it will create a new layer called count, which is this pink one, which has got the same geographies. And if we have a look at the attribute table, we can see it's got our local authority data, IMD stuff, and at the very end, our population as well. And at the very end, the column called num points. And that's the number of Greenspace access points in that local authority. So this has worked. So let's save it as a new layer in our geo package. So it's permanent. So we can stick with calling this count for the moment. And we can get rid of our temporary one as well, because we don't need that. So we could symbolize this using the symbology tools, but we're interested in the relationship between the two. So let's use the Plotly tool to do this scatter plot. So if you've not installed it already, plugins, manage and install plugins. And then when that appears, you search for Plotly. So on this computer, it's already installed it, but if you haven't, it will say install plugin, so click that. I'm not going to do this because it's already here. Once it's installed, it's not the most obvious plugin to find. It's put an icon here. So on here, this is my screen, and this will open up our Plotly window, which looks a bit like this. If you can't find this icon, it's possible the toolbar isn't visible. So if you click View Toolbars and then make sure Plugins toolbar is selected, because that's the one we're using for this. Okay, so the Data Plotly plugin is quite flexible. We can do quite a lot with it, but we're just going to do a simple scatter plot. So we want to make sure we have our count layer selected. And we want to set X to num points. So that's the number of Greenspace points. And we want the y-axis to be IMD. So we're going to have IMD average score. And with the rest of the defaults are fine. We click create plot. And Plotly will create our scatter plot. And here we go. So this is the relationship between the two data sets. So if I shrink that a little bit, we can see, okay, so low level of Greenspace access points, high level, and then low level of deprivation, high level of deprivation. So there may be some sort of trend vaguely. It's probably a bit of a stretch to say there's a relationship visually, but we can see how the two data relate to each other. What might be a better measure is if we look at this by population. So if we go into our count layer, we've got our population data and we can do a calculation. So we can divide the number of points divided by the population. So we need to turn editing on, create a new field, so this one, and we'll give it a name. So Greenspace Access pop, and we want decimal number real, which is okay. So that's added a column in here, and now we actually need to do the calculation. So this is the field calculator tool, and this is quite a powerful tool, and it allows us to do all sorts of interesting calculations. Here we want to update existing field and choose Greenspace Access per pop. In fact, you can actually create the field and calculate it in one go, but I tend to do it this way just so the process is a bit clearer. So we can use our existing fields. So fields and values, these are the columns that are in our data set. So we want to take our number of points and divide by population 2019. And if you see, it gives us a little preview. So this is for Aaron, so that's one for unitary authorities. And it's given us a preview of 0.001. If we scroll through, we can see Basingstoke can see 0.006. These are very small numbers, so it will make sense to multiply it by 1,000 to give us Greenspace access points per 1,000 people. So 6 for Basingstoke and Dean, 4 for Bracknell Forest, and so on. So if we hit OK, we can then see it's populated the data. Cool. So let's turn off editing and save this. And we could symbolize it on the map, and we could also update our Plotly graph. So if we've got a graph here already, go back to the first page here and then click Clean Plot Canvas, and that will blank the plot. And then we can create a new one with our newly calculated data, the Greenspace access per pop. And so here we have Greenspace access per pop, 0 to 6 or 6, 7. A bit more of a relationship here, I think it's fair to say. So the higher the deprivation, the less green space, and the lower the deprivation, the more green space. Excellent. This takes us to the end of Practical 3. So make sure you save your project, and I look forward to seeing you in one of my other videos. Thank you very much.